Hello, people! Anex here with an epic sci-fi review. I thought I'd take a break from fantasy this week to check out a much anticipated sci-fi release, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This book is described as an epic sci-fi space opera set in Christopher Paolini's own interconnected universe, the Fractalverse. It's the first entry into that universe, and man, it's a good one. This is the sort of book that you read for hours and hours, getting more and more immersed into that story, and will blow you away with its ending. Full disclosure, in terms of Paolini's books, I've read Aragon a long time ago, probably when I was like 10 or 12 years old, and I don't think I've read any of the other Inheritance Cycle books. In terms of sci-fi, as far as I can remember, I've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, those 4 books, by Douglas Adams, and yeah, that's it. So having shown that I have no experience or anywhere near enough qualifications to review this book, let me review this book in my own 5-point review. Like a lot of my other reviews, this video is split into 5 categories, and I will discuss each of these categories in more depth. Unlike my other reviews, there are absolutely no spoilers in this video. I'm talking about nothing that isn't mentioned already in the promotional material or the blurb for the book. But I am going to be making a separate spoiler discussion, and I'll release that as soon as I finish editing it when I get some time. Without further ado, number 1, the universe building. Like I said, this story is set in the Fractalverse, which is Paolini's own interconnected universe that includes Earth and I guess all of us as well. The book starts around 300 years from present day. Humanity is now a spacefaring civilization now that we've discovered faster than light travel. Honestly, I just love how there's a full scientific paper at the end of the book explaining how the whole faster than light travel works. I'm not the greatest at physics, but to me it seems just close enough to reality to be feasible. That feeling actually applies to quite a lot of different things in this book. Paolini clearly did a ton of research before he even started writing, which really shows. When you visit another planet and he's describing the plant and animal life on that planet, or just a sequence of a ship landing, the descriptions are so well thought out and create such a strong sense of realism because you can see that it's based on science that is already existing and pushing it slightly further into the realms of science fiction to create a plausible thing that could happen in our universe. I think this is vital in building immersion in the story. A neat bit of universe building that really stood out to me was when a character says that some of the chemicals that they're handling could cause cancer, and Kira, our protagonist, replies, "That's easy enough to treat." The attention to detail in this book in general when it comes to anything from medical technology to warfare to faster than light travel and the implications of all of these advancements on humanity is worth applauding. The strangeness of the aliens that we meet is another important detail that isn't missed here. They're not just humans that look different. They're very clearly an intelligent species that developed on an entirely different planet, and they have values and thought processes and biologies that are completely different to us. The descriptions for these species is equal parts fascinating and unsettling. There's so many other cool bits of universe building in the story that I want to talk about, but that would involve giving away plot points and spoilers. So let's move on. Number 2, the action. I did not expect there to be as much action as there was in this book. From start to finish, it's packed with brilliant action sequences that are all differently choreographed. You've got the massive spaceship battles, the big group fights between humans and aliens, and also the one-to-one fights. There's a massive variety. Out of those, I found the spaceship fights to be the hardest to identify with. Because of the vastness of space, those battles are usually quite slow-moving, and we're usually just passive observers of those fights. The coolest ones are the one-to-one fights and the group fights when you get a lot more personal with these characters. The writing of the action is thrilling and tense. There's a constant feeling of massive stakes attached to every bit of action. These aren't usually short fights either. They're long sequences with a lot happening at the same time. I think Paolini writes most of them masterfully. Each fight is like its own short story, with moments of heart-stopping action, brief moments of rest, and they're full of revelations and surprises. It's brilliant. Also, for reasons I can't really talk about without giving away spoilers, the fights get cooler and way more awesome as you progress in the story. Most importantly, the progression in this coolness happens very organically, building and building until it reaches its insanely badass peak at the end. The final 2 action sequences are some of the best in my opinion. In the last 300 or 400 pages of this book, the story just puts its feet on the gas pedal and it just goes without stopping. There is no rest. For that reason, the second half of this book is fantastic. Number 3, Kira Navárez. Kira Navárez, xenobiologist, is our protagonist in the story, and she's the only character's point of view that we explore this universe through. So over the 850 odd pages of this book, you get to know her very well, and I have to say, I like her. My favorite thing about Kira is that she's an active protagonist. She doesn't just sit around waiting for the story to happen to her. Pretty much every major event in this book happens because she makes an active decision to go out and do something, which then has an effect on the story. I really love a character with agency in a book. She's also got a great personality. She's determined and hardworking and caring, but she also has flaws that are revealed in the story, and these define her just as much as her positives. This isn't a fish out of water story either, like Aragorn was. Kira is an experienced xenobiologist who's explored some of the universe already and has been doing her job for a while by the time we meet her. This is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, Kira already knows most of the things about the workings of the human civilizations, and so nothing needs to be explained to her. But on the other hand, we as the reader need to learn about this new universe, so good exposition delivery is vital. This is executed well for the most part. It's interspersed in the story through Kira's thoughts, and it gives us the info when we need it. The exposition dumps feel more clumsy and heavy-handed at the start, but it stops becoming a problem pretty soon. I think this actually applies to quite a lot of the book. The writing in general just kind of improved as you read more of the book. The beginning few chapters felt less refined and the dialogue was less polished. This might be to do with Paolini's writing getting stronger further on in the book, or it might be just that I got used to his style of writing. But for me, a lot of the problems that I noted earlier on in the book stopped becoming problems pretty soon. Back to Kira, of course, no character exists in isolation. As the story progresses, we get introduced to a whole crew of other characters, some human and some not so human. They are all very unique individuals with strong character traits and distinct personalities that lets us identify with all of them on quite a personal level. I think they all have interesting backstories that define who they are. I think a lot of them could have done with a bit more of a character development or an arc in the story, but we'll get to that in a minute. Number 4, the pacing. This is a very long book, coming in at close to 900 pages. This was a bit daunting for me to start because 900 pages is a lot of time investment for a story. But I'm glad I started because it definitely paid off in the end. When you write a book this big, with basically 0 subplots, pacing is extremely important. I think it's handled reasonably well here. The story starts out quite slow for me. It's an intriguing premise, but the setup is quite slow. And then once it gets going, the pacing is a bit of a mixed bag. The story structure works a bit like this. There's a lot of long, brilliant action sequences. These are interspersed with a lot of quiet moments where our characters are traveling and bonding, or there might be some scenes of exposition dumps, or there might be several pages of Kira's introspection. That stuff is relatively less interesting. I think it all depends on how much you care about these characters. I personally really liked the crew that we're introduced to, so those scenes of them traveling and bonding and just talking are really fun for me. A lot of the introspective stuff is less interesting. And I think there's also a fairly jarring jump between the scenes of action and the quieter stuff. Also, this book is big. I think I've mentioned that already. And honestly, you really feel that length, but not in a bad way. The book really feels vast and epic in scope. I think this is partially to do with the fact that the book spans such vast distances and it deals with quite a lot. But I also realized this book actually feels so big because it's 2 separate books. It's one continuous story, but it's told in quite distinguishable 2 parts. So there's an inciting incident, a rise in tensions, a quest, and an epic climax, and then things quieten down for a bit, and then story progresses for a bit more, and then it starts all over again with a massive rise in tensions, and the story just propels on from there. It's sort of like Paolini wrote 2 books to tell a story, and then he sort of just removed some of the waffle in between to make it one big book. Of course, I'm not going to complain about this. I enjoy reading a full, satisfying story in a single book. Number 5, plot versus character. You might have noticed that I haven't talked about the characters in this book an awful lot, which is very strange for me. That's partly because I don't want to spoil any surprises in this book, but also because it's an extremely plot-driven story. By that, I mean that the book gives greater importance for the story going from point A to B to C to D, rather than story progressing through strong character growths. One style isn't inherently better than the other, they're just different ways of writing a book. Also, this doesn't apply to everyone. Kira, as I've mentioned before, goes through a lot of changes in the story and really grows within herself. A lot of the other supporting characters, despite how much I like them, don't really do that. A lot of the crew that Kira travels with have distinct personalities when you meet them, and then through the course of the story they stay pretty much the same. Sure, their relationship with Kira changes, but they don't really change as people themselves. I feel like they just reveal themselves more and open up more by the end. You learn a lot about their motivations and their backstories, but not much happens with them beyond that. There's also a scene pretty close to the end that wraps up these characters' stories in a way that I didn't really like. Some people might enjoy it, but it's got to do with some gifts, and to me it felt kind of forced and wasn't really the best way to wrap everything up. Of course, bear in mind that that is just one small quibble about the ending that I have. Everything else about that ending is perfect, including that last sentence that I really want to talk about, but I can't do it without doing spoilers. So yeah, this is a very plot-driven story. I've been told that this is pretty normal in science fiction, which is fine. I don't have a strong preference for either, to be honest. The plot in this book is great and is original enough for me to still enjoy the book a lot. I didn't start reading this book as a Christopher Paolini fan because I hadn't checked out a lot of his other massively successful books, but he's sure converted me now. After finishing this, I'm looking forward to anything else that he writes in this Fractalverse. It has so much possibilities. This universe that he's designed is brilliant in its detail. There's still so many mysteries that it left to tell stories about. I'll for sure be the first in line to read anything else he writes from now on. And if nothing else, the guy can really come up with a great name for a book. To Sleep in a Sea of Stars is so beautiful and poetic, but you have to read right to the end of the book to really understand that title. So I highly recommend that you check this out. It's well worth your time. It's got great action, an enjoyable and thrilling plot, a brilliant sci-fi setting, some fun characters, so except for a slight pacing issue, it's brilliant. If you enjoyed this review and want more, then make sure you check out the other videos on this channel. Also make sure you smash that subscribe button for even more weekly reviews. I also really love doing spoiler discussions on this channel, so I'm going to be doing a separate spoiler-filled video for this book when I have some time to make that. Make sure you subscribe to catch that as well. If you're already a massive sci-fi fan, then tell me in the comments what else I should be checking out in this genre. Right now, I'm reading The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, the first book in the Stormlight Archives. I'm at about 150 pages, and I have some mixed thoughts on it at the moment. We'll see if my thoughts change about that, and that will most likely be the review next week. Also in the coming weeks, I'm going to be checking out the Dune book to see what all the fuss is about there. In the meantime, make sure you like and share this video, subscribe to the channel. Also tell me your thoughts about this book in the comments below. Let's try to keep it spoiler free though. Till next week, see ya!